Hello, hello, and welcome to the Weeder Life podcast. I'm your host, Erica Weederlight, and I am the CEO and founder of We the Light. I help humans who feel inadequate, broken, self-conscious, and shamed around their sexuality to reclaim their aliveness, their power, and to have a renewed relationship to pleasure while preparing themselves to feel hella confident to date others and themselves. AKA, I'm guiding people to live their #best lives. I have to give you a fair warning. I do unfortunately swear like a drunken sailor, so if you do have little ones by you, just be sure to pop in some earbuds. All right, friends, let's buckle up and let's rock it to this week's episode. Hello, everyone. I am super personally psyched about this amazing guest that we have on today. I was frantically writing questions because this awesome guest, Christopher Linkenbach, is just an amazing human all around. He has so much wisdom, so much insight. I have so many questions to ask him. When I was researching him, I'm like, and this, and this, and this. So this is going to be a really exciting chat today. There's so many cool things to say about him. He's an awesome teacher and a guide. He's the host of Becoming a Gentleman podcast. He's all over YouTube. So definitely, go and check him out. And he has so many things, so much insight and wisdom to bring to us today. So hi, Christopher. Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yes, Erica, thank you so much. I'm honored to be on the show. So thank you.
Thank you. Like I said, I have so many questions. I lovingly stalked you. Obviously we had a pre-talk, but I was like, oh my gosh, this man is amazing. And he has, a wealth of info. But before we talk about all the great things that you're studying and that you teach and you hold space for people, especially men, you're so interesting. Can we talk about your backstory? You have such a cool backstory. It sounds like you were doing real estate, and then you transitioned to this amazing world of relationships and love because you were so passionate about it. Can you talk to us about how you got here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that where it really stems is sort of just the frustration that we all feel when it comes to just sort of this underlying theme in the human condition that we all experience loneliness in some way, shape, or form. And I think that my desire or my intention to learn more about love and relationships is really just an intention for my own life of trying to understand my own condition of navigating human relationships and really how to create healthy and sustainable relationships. And I also recognize that within our culture right now, we have a staggering statistic where almost at least half, if not more than a majority of the marriages are failing in today's culture right now. And we're perpetuating these same cycles. So in recognizing pretty early on that the relationships that we get into really predicate around the relationships that we had with our parents and also the relationships that they had with each other. So recognizing that if we want to create healthy and sustainable relationships, and if our parents didn't have healthy and sustainable relationships, then we need to switch something up. But it's not as easy as just saying oh, I'm going to do something different, because these programs are embedded into our subconscious mind about what we conceptualize a relationship to be. So I guess my story is really a lot about failure and heartbreak and kind of just weaving my way through high school drama and through college and just dating a bunch of people and never having successful relationships, and really just asking myself A, why am I not getting the quality of romantic partner that I want to be with? And then B, when I am getting with the quality of romantic partner that I want to be with, why are these relationships failing? So yeah, that's kind of, those are some deep questions that I dove into. So yeah.
I just want to pause you because I feel honored to walk on the same path as you, because it's, especially when you really do the work, and you hold such exquisite space for others, but when you do the work, it's it can be wildly confronting. So when you were saying that, I was oh yeah, I feel you, because it is truly with love can be very confronting, like you said, going through, especially the one where it's okay, I bring in this amazing partner, why is it not working? So I'm just, bowing to you, celebrating you that you are down to do the real uncomfy work.
Thank you. And I want to acknowledge that. So I'm just now beginning my journey in becoming a marriage and family therapist. So I really am basing a lot of this off of previous experience, and then just my own personal deep dives into literature and videos as well. So I'm definitely not what you would consider expert. And I'm not, a licensed marriage and family therapist or a licensed coach, but I do carry within me, experience and hopefully guidance as well. So yeah, I want to preface with that for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, from what I know about you, it sounds like you really are like you really are doing the work. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, from what I know, it's not like you're regurgitating information that you read from a book. It sounds like you're really deep diving and looking at these patterns and trying to shift to them and re-relate to them. And so I appreciate that you're doing that. I'm so interested. What has been your most like eye-opening lesson so far from doing this work where you're like, oh, this is why that's happening? Like, what big connecting of dots has slash, have happened for you?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in regards to just love and relationships is really probably one of the most simple, and I would almost even say cliche, which is that you really do need to learn how to love and hold space for yourself before you can for another individual. And I think for me in my own healing, recognizing that if I want to hold space for a woman in my life, that there is this inner feminine inside of me that I also need to recognize and hold space for as well. But I also want to go into this. I think the cliche is that people always say that you need to learn to love yourself before you learn to love another individual. And I think that that can be a trap in some way because our entire life is learning how to love ourselves, right? We're never going to just like hit this place where it's like, all right, unconditional love and surrender from here on out. Like life is a journey of learning to love and to dance with yourself. And so I think that transforming those words of learning how to love yourself before you love another into honoring yourself and honoring where you are so that okay, honoring, do I want to date myself? Would I date myself as this person? And if not, honoring that you're on a journey to learning how to get to becoming an individual that you would want to date.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that, or I should say, even if we had different beliefs, I'm still grateful. But I'm a grateful. I have a similar thing that I teach to my clients, and it's along the same lines. It's a really tricky balance, right? Because I think society teaches one of two narratives. Usually, the main one is like, whatever, you can get into a relationship and then, you'll learn to love yourself. And the other ones, I see people perpetually putting off this piece of their life, like you said, because it's like, well, I don't love myself yet. I don't fully. And so I see people going into traps of that one end of the spectrum. Like, I need to do more work. I need to hire 6 more coaches and therapists. And that's great. But I see them putting that, on a, keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And then other people I see being like, I'm avoiding this. I don't want to hold space for both, like you're saying, like doing the inner work and holding myself, accepting myself, and bringing in another. So I think it's like a really fine line. And I'm really glad that you voiced that really fine line. But that's a great place to live and to do this work. I think, like you said, it's like going to be a lifelong mission to love yourself. We're going to, we endlessly change. So it's going to continuously be a new relationship to ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And Erica, I also think too, it's like recognizing that some of the work in learning to love ourselves is going to be through the relationship. And the relationship really is a mirror to show you where are you holding back in love for yourself. If you look at the relationship as a mirror of something that's providing you love, well, everywhere that is not, you don't see love in that relationship are all the areas that are being highlighted where you don't really hold that space for yourself, right? So it's learning to use the relationship not only as a source for love in your life, but as a tool for growth as well. And I really think that that's kind of like what this next level of relationship, what I would consider to be a conscious relationship is, which is two individuals recognizing that they're here to grow and they're here to work on their own emotional triggers throughout the process of the relationship.
Yeah, you hit it so head on because, we both have been doing this work. And I know I've been doing this work for years and years and years and years. And it was deeply healing and deeply rewarding. But there's nothing more triggering than being in a partnership. And now in this space, I'm finding things I thought I worked on in years. But now being in a partnership, old shit is coming up. You know what I mean? There, I'm like, ooh, this is cute. Didn't see this for a while. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, Okay, this is,
Welcome back.
yeah, I'm like, motherfucker, I thought I worked on this. It's so funny because I remember last year I ignorantly was like, I'm so glad I'm done with that phase. And it's like, aha, you silly bitch. Like, it's coming
Yes,
back.
here it is.
Yep.
It's an onion, there are layers
Yes.
to
And
it.
a different
Yes.
layer because individually I could be like, oh, I feel pretty good about that. But when it's with another person, ooh. So I think I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that's the falsehood of that story too. Like, I'm going to work on myself so much and then I'll be ready. It's like, that's fantastic, but I don't want to say nothing will prepare you to be ready, but it's going to be a whole different set of circumstances and triggers, and it's going to hit you in the most loving way, but in a mirroring way, it's going to trigger different pieces of you. So I'm so glad you voiced that because it's a different level. So thank you for bringing that. And it's funny because I was like, "Ooh, I want to jump right into this because I have so many questions." When I was like, "Yes." When I was speaking of being triggered, and I was scrolling through your YouTube, and I was like, "Yes, I feel like this will resonate with so many people." I think a big when we're alone, we're like, "I wouldn't be triggered by that," but then in partnership, it comes up is the theme of jealousy. So, like I think
That's a good one.
right? Like I see people all the time, like by themselves, like I would never be like that person. I would never be that partner. And then boom, enter a partnership and it's like, whoa, it is like trigger city. So can you talk to us about thoughts, comment, like all your insight and wisdom about the jealousy game?
Yeah. So jealousy is definitely, it's a really primal emotion inside of us, right? It's very animalistic behavior and it's very, I would say almost like infantile understanding of the brain and of love as well. And it's also a mindset of scarcity to say that in some way your love is not abundant. But I think that jealousy really stems from a super simple base assumption that somewhere in your belief systems, you do not believe that you are good enough to be with this particular person. And the way that that manifests is fear, but the way that you experience it is anger, the anger of jealousy. And everybody knows that feeling of jealousy. It's just like your stomach gets into knots and, your like solar plexus kind of like tightens a little bit. And it's just like that, that anger starts to overtake you. But really that anger is just a fear of, oh my goodness, this person might abandon me. Like there's some deeper underlying issues here that really stem back to like early childhood. And like when we're playing in the realm of relationship, we really are playing with these realms of some of these belief systems we picked up when we were infants, 2 or 3 years old, of understanding how love works and flows in our life. And so recognizing and thinking back to the relationships that we had with our parents, well, we can see these same habitual patterns being played out through the realms of, for instance, jealousy. Like, oh my goodness, if I see them out speaking with another individual, that means that they're not going to be able to give love to me. That's, like I said, that's such an infantile understanding of love, but that's the way that it plays out. It's saying, I am not good enough to be with this person. But once again, if we look through the lens of relationship as a tool for growth, it's like, okay, thank you for bringing this to me. Thank you for showing me that there's a part of myself that I don't fully love or I'm not holding in regards to the actuality of who I am. Right. So when we see that, it's like, okay, can we breathe with that? Can we sit with that for a minute and see what's happening? And then, if you're doing parts work as well, can we speak to this part? There's a part of us that's triggered. So that's a fun one. And it's one that I think everyone experiences in relationships. And like you mentioned, you don't think about it going into it. It's really easy to be in like this confident mindset when you're first getting into a relationship, and then that honeymoon period, everything is so lovey-dovey, everything's great, but then like one little trigger here and there, it's just like, there it is. So
I think you nailed it because it comes up I'm noticing in myself in such interesting ways and in different ways with other partners, if that makes sense. So in the past, it came out this flavor. And now, because I've done so much work, it's still coming out, but it is still present and it's still a flavor. And I think you hit it so well because I think it touches so many pieces. It is the abandonment, it is the worthiness piece, it is like a conditional way of looking at love. And it feels, especially speaking for myself, like if there's anxious attachment, dear Lord, pray, like because it's so, you are so wrapped up. I've been actively working, and I know my clients of mine have been actively working to come to a more centered place with that relationship because jealousy feels, like you said, it's very fucking primal and it feels really real. Like it's kind of like you black out because it feels so present and real and definite, which is most of the time not true. You know what I mean? So it's such a fascinating, and I'm glad that you do talk about that. I'm glad that's part of your work because I think it's something we're like, oh, that was silly. I'm embarrassed. I'm jealous. Moving on. But I'm so grateful that you do talk about that. And that's a component of what you teach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what I do teach really is like self-reliance and also just like learning to navigate your emotions. And I think that the way I go about doing that is by using love and relationships, right? It's kind of like, listen, here's what you would like is a healthy and happy relationship. That is awesome. And that's great. And we're going to get you there. But let's take a look at what's going on inside first and foremost.
Yeah, no, that's so helpful. It's funny because I wanted to bridge these two questions, and this is a perfect opportunity. I just read this awesome book. If people are interested, it's by Esther Perel, and it's Mating in Captivity, and it's about bringing the erotic with relationships. And of something that I wanted to ask you, which is a perfect wedge because jealousy is talked a lot about in that book, but also still continuing like that flame and that like keeping it fun and the relationship alive. So, yeah, I feel like you have thoughts about this.
Absolutely. And Esther Perel actually talks quite a bit about this too. But Esther Perel basically mentions that there are two instances in which we feel desire or the most desire for our romantic partner. And one of those instances is when they're up on stage or when they're in their power doing their thing. So, you're not with them in that moment, you're observing them and you're watching them. But then she says that the desired time is when you're actually away from your romantic partner. And that is something that I think we fail to recognize today and that we overuse is that romantic attraction actually grows when you are apart from each other, not when you are together. It is the release of energy when you are together, right? And it grows in your time apart from each other. So if you are in, let's for instance say like a codependent relationship and you're constantly texting every second of the day, you know where each other at all the time, there's no more mystery with that. And so there's no more sexual tension with that as well. The sexual tension comes with the mystery, right? And so that's why the relationship is such a paradox because we're asking of it to be the sense of security, yet we're also asking of it to be spontaneity and a mystery as well. And so I think the biggest thing to recognize is that romantic attraction actually grows in time apart. And the way that I like to look at this is actually like the way in which music is played. So if you think about how notes are played, you have a note that is struck, in cadence, but in between those notes is actually space. And it's that space between the notes that allows for those notes to actually make sense and have meaning. So think of the notes as the interactions with each other. So every time you interact with each other, you're coming together and you're releasing all that energy that you built up when you were in that space apart. It's the wondering about the other person. It's the thinking about them. What are they up to? What are they doing? How are they feeling? How do I stand with them? It's all of this that comes up when you're not with them. And then when you're with them, that's when that release happens. And so I think that today, one of the biggest problems that we face is over texting because texting is such a new technology and we haven't really integrated it with our relationships yet. If you think about like our parents or grandparents, they weren't texting each other all the time. This isn't part of our dynamic of our makeup today. And so in recognizing that you don't need to text your partner all the time, it's okay to have that space apart. And it's actually healthy as well to not know where your partner is 100% of the time. So, analyzing, is this relationship healthy? But I think recognizing that our sexual attraction does grow when we are spending time apart from each other.
Yeah, that was such a whoa moment for me because I love, like you said, and Esther Perel talks about this, so many people talk about this, is like love and eros, love and or the erotic have different needs. And that's not usually talked about. Like that's not usually parsed apart. We just we put it all in one package. But like you said, it's like love needs that consistency, not smothering, but like needs that consistency and that safety and, that grounding. And usually desire, erotic lives in, like you said, the mystery and the, ooh, like that needs tension. It needs something to rub up against. And they have two different needs. And so often we're feeding it one need. And that's why so often things could fall apart. So I'm so grateful that you said that. And it's funny because when you were talking, I was like, I think this is why it started from a good place, but it got distorted. When people like relationship coaches or love coaches are like, have these tips and tools, like, don't text him. And it's like, it's coming from a good place. Like it can come because we understand where it comes from. Like it creates, the tension, all that. But I don't think people understand why. You know what I mean? So it has a good root. There is like a scientific root underneath it. But I think we've lost that. And now it's just become, you see like the quick tips and, in Cosmo and people on podcasts and stuff being like, don't text them, be elusive. And it's like, I get what you're saying, but we're missing the why. And I think that's why people feel shitty around it. Cause it's like, well, that's games. I don't want to play games, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm always going to be present. I'm not going to wait for the text, so I think, you get what I'm saying? Like, I think a really good message got really muddied. And then people are like, well, I want an authentic relationship, so I'm not going to play games. So it's kind of a sin in a way. You know what I mean? Because it's like, wait, there was truth to it, but it got messy.
I think that it like depends on the angle you're coming from. So you could either be coming from that game playing sense, or you could just be coming from a place of security. And I think that when you are constantly just like hitting each other back and forth, that there's nothing to talk about when you do get together. So it's recognizing that if you already know what they did throughout their day, you're taking away literally one of my favorite conversations to have with my lovers, which is that, what did you do today? Tell me about your life. I want to hear it from you. I don't want to read it off of a screen. And I think we mix our addiction to our phone in with the relationship. And so we're more addicted to just like this notification that a particular individual creates within us, as opposed to actually loving this other individual. So are you addicted to the phone and the texting, or are you, addicted to this person? And that's a whole different conversation. But, recognizing that it's okay to spend that time apart. And then when you do come together, you have more to talk about as well.
Yeah. And it's so true. And, again, speaking for the anxious people in the house, it's such a false dopamine hit. You know what I mean? And it's such a falsehood of, like you said, like, okay, thank God they texted, I'm okay. And it's like, ooh, oof, oof. When you put your power, that you're putting all of your power in their, I've done it in the past, but as also coached clients being like, why didn't they answer? Why? And in full panic attack mode. And they answer and they're like, oh, that was so silly. And I'm like, wait, hold on. I get it. But that's not what we're waiting for. It's not the text. It's that, like you said, that you're okay, like in your sovereignty and your alignment, like that you're okay no matter what. But we focus more on, did you get a text? Did they text back? How long did it take? I think we're focused on kind of the wrong thing. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And I know we talked about this pre-call, and I am taking a breath because I have such an interesting relationship to it. So being like, studied in Tantra, there's a lot of, and Taoism and all that stuff. It's yin yang, divine feminine, divine masculine. And I think there's such a beautiful place for it. It's helped me and clients tremendously. It really has helped me tremendously in helping clients. However, and I think you feel the same because we kind of touched on this, I never wanted to talk about it because I think it can be an exclusive conversation. I've talked to lots of friends and clients and family members who are in the trans community, who are, non-binary, and they feel like this feels like a really fucking exclusive tool or theory. That's why for me, as, cis person, a cis woman, I was like, yes, I can, I can relate to this. And I also see how exclusive it is. And that's why I always was resistant to talking about this. And so I wanted to, as we enter the divine feminine / masculine conversation, I wanted to put that disclaimer out because I think you feel the same way, of how can we make it a safe space for everyone, and I know some people use different terminology, but it's dicey because there's such richness and there's such good lessons in this, and it's so helpful, and it sometimes can be hella exclusive, excuse me, and feel isolating for people. And that's why I never wanted to teach it on a grand scale, because I want everyone to feel included and seen and heard and loved. So I'll say this. I know when we talked about this, and we share the same opinion, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, that we both agree that regardless where you fall in the gender spectrum, we do have these, I'll say, energies in us. And if masculine, feminine, yin yang don't work for you, we can look at it like dualities. Like we said with the desire, it's something, an energy to rub up against. So I just wanted to put that disclaimer, if people are like, ooh, feminine, masculine, that feels so gross. If some people love that, God bless, jam out, hell yeah. And if people like that feels fucking sticky, no problem. I think it's like, okay, is it a duality? Is it a different energy? Is it, a non-binary rock star. And that, I think I just, again, wanted to put that disclaimer to make people feel included and not like, oh, I feel shut out of this conversation.
Yeah, 100%. And I completely agree. And when I talk about masculine and feminine energies, I don't mean man and woman. I literally am talking about masculine and feminine energies, which are the glue that basically hold our not only our relationships together, but the entire universe together at some level. If you were to go into Eastern mysticism and talk about Shakti and Shiva, it's that same dynamic, right? Yin and yang. You can name it whatever you'd like to. I'm with you, or I'm not trying to exclude anyone from this conversation. It's just that it's just like a north and a south pole, right? These are just reference points, and they just happen to be energy systems that exist inside of all of us and within every relationship that we interact in.
Oh, I love North and South Pole. That's cool. Thank you. Because I always say like dualities and, but I love North. So if that's fucking awesome. Thank you. That's really helpful. The North and South Pole. And it sounds like they both need to coexist to feel full and alive. And can you talk to us about like your relationship with that for yourself personally? Or I should say, like, how has this system supported you to feel more alive, to feel more aligned, to feel more full?
I would say it is first in recognizing which energy system is most predominant in myself. And so when I identify as an individual, I identify as an extremely feminine, masculine man. And so what I mean by that is that I am an extremely sensitive and intuitive individual, yet I also carry within me this deep quality of masculine presence as well. And when I mean masculine, I don't mean tuxedo wearing, door holding. I don't mean cigar smoking. I don't mean, business boss CEO. I mean masculine in its essence, which is security. So I hold within myself a deep sense of security. And then along with that, I also carry within me the feminine, which is a deep sense of openness as well. And so my whole work is predicated on what is known as the gentleman. So in my work, becoming a gentleman, when I hear the word gentleman, I really hear the word gentle man. And to me, what that means is it is an individual, it is a masculine individual who within themselves has learned to hold and dance with their own feminine side, right? It's learning to dance with that side of us that has feelings and that wants to express itself and that feels like emotions, and to allow myself to be vulnerable. And I think that in learning to hold space for my own vulnerability, I have given myself the ability to step back into my power and to integrate both of these energy systems. And by no means am I 100% healed and complete. I am working on this every single day, but as it's an ongoing process, but I'm definitely learning how to hold these energy systems within myself and recognize that there is this feminine entity, and it requires my sense of security at times too, right? Like I notice sometimes when that gets triggered. And I think that one of the coolest pieces of information that I heard pretty recently in a conversation is that typically in our relationships, what is happening when we get triggered usually isn't that predominant energy system within us. And I think it's important for every individual, whether you're, cis man, cis woman, or non-binary, there's going to be a predominant masculine or feminine energy, or yin and yang, or north and south, and recognizing which one you are, but then recognizing you have this other one within you as well. And when we're triggered in relationships, usually it isn't the predominant one. So for me, in my example, when I'm triggered in a relationship, usually it isn't my masculine side that's being triggered. Usually it's my feminine side that got stuck somewhere at 14 years old that is still there getting harassed on the playground for liking somebody. It's that part of myself that's getting triggered in the relationship, and vice versa with my partner. It typically isn't her feminine side that's being triggered either. She can hold her feminine very well, but her masculine is usually the one that gets triggered. And my feminine and her masculine are usually the ones that end up getting kind of kinked in the relationship. It isn't my masculine and her feminine, right? So it's learning to dance with these energy systems inside of us. And one way we can go about doing that is by recognizing and acknowledging the first relationships we had with these energy systems, which were our parents or lack of parents. So sitting with, how did you and your mother interact with each other? How did you receive love from your father? And was your father in your life? Could your father hold space for you? So this all goes into that. But I think that my work is really predicated on bringing the feminine back into the masculine.
So beautiful. That's so good. And I think you're going to be like, what? But this conversation is, I think, extremely healing for all. One of the things that I hear all the time is, people are like, oh, what type of clients you have? And I'm like, everyone, like I have every type of client. And so many people are like, wait, so like cis men come to you? And I'm like, they do, yeah, like, yeah, of course. And they're like, no, they don't. I'm like, no, they do. Like, I'm all open to everyone. If someone resonates with me, of course, like, I'm a safe space to them if they resonate with my work. And they're like, but cis men? And I'm like, yes. And so often the first questioner is like, what's their problems? They have problems. And it's like such a bummer to hear that, because I get to witness and hold these fucking incredible men, like these incredible, amazing humans. And that makes me sad that like that's a little piece of the cultural narrative. Like, oh, they have why are they there? Like, and so this is a silly question, but like, I don't even know where I want to go with this, but like, this is a two-parter. Like, what do you most see? Like, what's the most, I mean, even that kind of answers itself, because that's problematic that some people don't think that cis men have problems. So that's so my first question to you is, what's like the most common issue, or I hate saying problem, but thing that comes up, and how can we, with compassion, hold space for our men friends? Because I'm holding space as a cis woman. You know what I mean? And I think I do a damn good job. However, I don't live and walk in these people's shoes. So like, how can we cultivate safeness and a space, and love for our family, friends, loved ones? Like, what do you think the men that you at least are working with or see, like, what do you guys need right now? Like, how can we support you? How can we nurture you? How can we cheerlead you? And what are the things that you think is up for, what's a common thing that's up for some of these guys right now?
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost, and I don't even think that this is exclusive to men, I think this is just like a human condition, which is that we are very averse to feeling our feelings and what's happening inside of our body. And I think that there's also a stigma, just even though we are pretty modern, that men need to behave in a certain way, and that is to not show emotion. I think that we still carry some deep wounds, generational wounds of that. And I think it's still within the culture today, even though there is a lot of support systems. So I think, to answer your question, working on yourself to give yourself the ability to hold space for another individual, right? Because if you recognize that there is an individual there who's suffering and needs to emote, and you don't know what to do, and you don't know how to hold space for that, you could actually end up hurting them even more. So it's learning to sit with your own vulnerability and your own wounds and getting deep with yourself. Every single one of us carries trauma. We did not escape childhood unscathed. And so to recognize that your wounds are now an ability to learn to heal yourself, but to allow that to then transmute and translate into being able to help heal another individual. So I'd say, to answer the first part of your question, which is, what do you think the biggest problem is? I would say the ability to freely express emotion when needed, right? And be able to cry and be able to emote. And I host a men's group every Tuesday here in Austin. And it is so amazing to just be a witness to, and to be able to create a space of men who are, predominantly straight, in a room just literally crying together, and how much that this is just needed in our society today. So that, and then to answer the second part of your question, which is, how can we begin to hold space for that? Like I mentioned, it's doing the work on yourself, and then also recognizing when somebody does need you in a moment, and to just be there with that.
Yeah. I got like emotional. I'm crying. Like, that was so beautiful. And personally, it's funny, when I did my, training, my certificate, at the end we did like majors. And so you could have a few majors. And I was like, I need to do the men's training. Even if I have men's clients or not, like, this is so invisible. Like, this work, I have a lot of compassion, and I feel very privileged and blessed. First of all, that I had the finances and I had the, accessibility to this work. But it was normal-ish for me to do pleasure classes and to, do these exercises where I'm screaming on the floor and crying. Like that was accessible to me. And so being with the men's work, that's not the norm. So I felt really grateful that I did have this training, and I'm really grateful for you that you're holding this epic space, because that's not usually the norm, like that. We don't really have that built in society. So grateful for people like you that are like taking a stand and doing this awesome work. I love that you talked about being able to hold yourself, because that's deep, really being able to deeply hold yourself, because being able to hold yourself is all of the things, the good, bad, the ugly, and being safe, feeling safe enough to express that. You're a big meditator. The first time we got on the call, I was like, me, I'm a Virgo. I'm fucking all over the place. I'm, an East Coaster. So I'm like, so when you came on the call, I was like, I can breathe. So can you talk to us about your meditation journey? Like, I'll just start with that. Like, talk to us about your meditation journey.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Virgo as well.
Oh, shut the fuck up. Really?
Yeah.
When's your birthday?
August 27th.
Oh, nice. You're the beginning of the Virgos. I love it.
So I would say the beginning of my meditation. So I did a 10-day Vipassana silent meditation retreat. And I actually did this the first time when I was an infant in my mother's womb. She did a 10-day Vipassana retreat, which is where you go and you sit in silence for 10 days. So you don't talk for 10 days. And these centers are completely free. They're all across the United States. They don't stick to a particular dogma. They're not considered Buddhism. They're not considered religion. They're just a center where you can go and just learn a specific type of meditation, which is Vipassana meditation. And these centers are a place for you to go and to just experience this. But that was, I guess, where you could consider my beginning of meditation. But then I ended up doing one when I was 21 years old. And I actually went back with my mom, this time not in the womb, and did one myself. But that is the single most profound event in my life, because that meditation has given me a tool to navigate my nervous system and has completely opened my eyes up to how reality works on some very deep, fundamental, and energetic levels. And it really just teaches you to see from your own mind and to not just constantly ask the outside world for answers and to listen to your own sense of intuition. But I have stuck with that practice. So I meditate for an hour every single morning, and then I meditate 15 to 30 minutes before bed every single night. And meditation means to get familiar with. And so that is what I feel like I'm doing every single morning when I'm meditating, is I'm getting familiar with. I'm literally just sitting in that sea of awareness and just watching my nervous system and watching what happens and where does my mind run off to and what is triggering me, what kind of emotions am I feeling, and then just like sitting there with it with an equanimous mind and learning not to jump into these emotions. It's not about fixing your emotions. It's about just observing them and not getting trapped in it, surfing the waves, right? So taking that practice into the day to day. So that when I'm out in public and somebody cuts me off in traffic, instead of, flipping them off and jumping out of my car, I can just relax and breathe into that and just take it for what it is and just ride that anger wave and then keep on moving. And that goes into relationships all the time. When you're out in public and you see, your lover and they look at somebody in a flirtatious way or something happens and you get triggered, instead of reacting and blowing up and making a huge scene about it. Like, if you know how to handle your own nervous system, well, then you can just breathe, calm yourself down, and then like, okay, I'm okay. This is okay. Right. So it's learning to do that too.
I literally was just going to say that bleeds so first of all in life, but it bleeds so beautifully into partnership, because you're less reactive. Good, bad, and ugly. You're not as like in the exterior of all of it. And even being in your presence, it feels like you live a pretty intuitively based life, I would say. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like you're pretty familiar with your intuition. How does that feel? Does that resonate? Like, I just feel like, I don't know, you're so good at not being reactive. And that's so nice to be in a situation with someone that's not reactive, because I'm like, oh wait, you're not.
I'm glad you think so, because I'm definitely still learning.
Well, listen, it's part of the fucking journey, you're doing great.
Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. I would say that it's really just like recognizing that every time I haven't listened to my intuition, I've gotten burned. And so it's like, okay, like I can hang up the phone, I get the message, So it's those little moments of like, even just discerning, like taking on a new client or speaking with somebody in public. Like, am I talking with them too long? It's really what it is. And Brene Brown did a whole study on this with the most compassionate individuals. What they recognized as a similarity across all of these is that they were able to set extremely strong boundaries. So that is such a huge thing of like feeling kind of like, even with this work of client work of like, our visions don't align here. And instead of just taking them on and, accepting that money, what if you just said no to that situation? Or even like those minute decisions of like being stuck in traffic and then like that little part of you that says, take a right here, take this lane, like listening to that, like those little things here and there, and then like slowly listening to that internal guidance system, like that's what dictates the direction in which you're headed.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing because most of us don't. I think sometimes when I suggest like, living a more intuitive led life, or people look at you and they're like, why? Or don't see the benefit of it. But I love that you voiced like, yeah, when I didn't listen to it, and same shit got hairy, So it's like, oh, I knew that. Why did I ignore that? So
Well, it's
yeah.
like red flags in relationships. It's like you see that red flag come up and you just like ignore it. But guess what? 3 months down the road, when all of a sudden them being a little bit too promiscuous for you, all of a sudden leads to them cheating on you. Well, guess what? You're going to recognize that. You're going to learn from it. And then the next time you see that behavior pattern when you're dating somebody, hopefully you've set that boundary now. You've learned that lesson and said, okay, thank you. I've had enough. I'm going to move on.
Yeah, that is so helpful. And again, this is like the best tool in relationships. So not getting so reactive and all. It's like I'm taking back my power. I'm listening to my instincts. I'm listening to my intuition. Is there anything that you like, this is a sidebar, but is there anything that like you love to geek out on that we didn't talk about in relationships that you're like, I fucking love this and I could talk about this forever?
I would say just recognizing how special it is when you do find love and to really just milk it for what it is. Because it's like a season, it comes and goes out of your life. And even when you're with a partner, sometimes it comes and goes as well. So when you are in love, being in love with yourself, but when you are in love in a relationship, really just taking that time to just be really present with that other individual, right? And like when you're going out on a date for an evening or you're just spending time together, like putting the phones away and just being with that other person, I think is so important. But I would say that don't take it for granted, and then just be a good human being too when it comes to these, because when we're playing with these dynamics in romantic relationships, yes, it's fun and there's so much joy, but we're also playing in the realms of the heart, and one little slip up and you can really screw somebody up. So recognizing the responsibility you carry in being in relationship with somebody and what an honor it is they have chosen to share this space with you.
That's fucking amazing because A, it feels good. But B, I'm like, yes, because yes. But B, because I think so often the narrative is, and this is why I teach people, and Nicole Moore taught me this, so I want to give credit where credit's due, is dating for growth versus dating for results. And that's the same as love, like love for growth, but also like being with that person, being connected versus I think there's a huge underbelly of a growth thing. Like, well, is this person, am I going to be married to this person? Or there's such an underbelly of this conversation because so often the people are like, am I going to marry this person? Or where is this going to go? And so we're often not in the present moment. Like I'm with you right now and we're jamming out and we're sharing we're sharing with each other and we're holding space for each other. So often it's like a little bit of like the underbelly panic of what is this going to be? Is this going to look like that? Is this person going to help me get to my goals? So I love that it feels very now slash gratitude focused versus projecting and future, a lot of future tripping. So thank you for that. I love that. I have 5 million other questions I want to ask you. I'm like, I want to ask you about becoming a minister and you going back to like, you're doing so many cool things with psychology. So I have literally 4,000 things to ask you. But that means you'll have to come back on, in the future. Cause I'm like, wait, Christopher, I have more. But yeah, before we wrap, is there any words of wisdom I know this is a general question because so many cool people listen, but like, is there any words of wisdom, advice or things, that you took away from this or, something that you feel like you have to voice before we go, like something that's really meaningful to you?
I would say, A, don't be afraid to feel your emotions. And B, to be present and enjoy your life. And that's really all you need.
Ooh, I know. And I'm like, that and alone, you gave us 2 bombs where I'm like, we could dissect that for hours. I'm like, that's so fucking good. I'm like, and I'm thinking of, well, I could have asked him this and this, but you're so amazing. And the great thing is that you share your words of wisdom. You have your podcast, you have awesome content on your YouTube channel. Where else can people find you? You are just so great and you practice what you preach. So where else can people find you and connect with you?
Absolutely. So I'm currently writing a book, Becoming a Gentleman, which is also the name of my podcast as well. So you can go to my website, becomingagentleman.love, if you'd like to find out a little bit more about who I am, or if you'd like to schedule a call as well. Instagram, Christopher_Linkenbach, and then YouTube, Christopher Linkenbach as well. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm very responsive. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yay. Thank you so much. And many more conversations, because I feel like this was just the tip of the iceberg. So we have so much more to jump in. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing such awesome things that we could talk hours on. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely, Erica. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Seriously, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode and on this podcast journey. And if you loved what we talked about today and you know another human who could definitely benefit from what was discussed, I would so appreciate if you would go ahead and share this podcast with them. Don't forget, hit subscribe or follow so you never ever miss an episode. And the great news is you can always follow me, my work, my blog, my podcast on my website at www.wethelight.org. And hey, remember, life is so much brighter when we shine. I'll see you next time.